You know, sometimes things aren't always what they appear to be. And so take, for example, this Merlin jacket that I've only had for a few months, or these gold top summer gloves, or indeed this pretty much new Shoei Glamster helmet. Great helmet, rubbish name. And what they all have in common is they all look very, very retro. These things wouldn't have looked out of place in around 1980. And indeed, my first ever jacket looks just like this. It was a hand-me-down that I got in about 1980, and that was a Louis Leathers jacket. And cue embarrassing photograph. But of course, these things aren't really old, and in fact they're full of modern technology. This jacket, for example, contains D30 body armour in the elbows, shoulders and a back protector. These rather nice summer gloves I have here from Gold Top come complete with a skifold protection there on the palm of your wrist, and it's also got floating knuckle armour from Knox, which is pretty much the best you can get. In the same way, this old looking Shoei Glamster helmet is incredibly light and is full of the very latest safety tech. So as I say, things aren't always what they appear to be, which brings me to the subject of this video, and that's right out there, which is this, my 2024 Norton Commando 961 SP. So a quick recap, I bought it last June, it's now April, and I've now done just over 2,000 miles on the bike, which isn't a lot, but I knew I didn't have much time to ride when I bought it, which is one reason why I bought this particular bike rather than, say, a big sports tourer. So I bought it to go out for maybe an hour or two on a sunny day, and at most a day out, because that's all the time I have at the moment. And for that purpose, it's been pretty much perfect. The handling is absolutely fantastic compared to what I'm used to. The forks are set at 24 degrees rake, which is quite a sort of extreme sports bike type of rake. And of course it's got Öhlins upside down suspension and Öhlins rear suspension. It's also got Brembo monoblock brakes and Brembo master cylinders, as well as things like completely electronic speedo and tacho, although they do look very old-fashioned, which is why I like it. But there's no denying it does look old-fashioned. And that's because of this quite retro looking bodywork, which I've come to really like. Oh, and by the way, the tank is plastic, it's not steel. But unlike in the previous models of this bike, made by the previous company of Norton, this one won't leak and be distorted by the ethanol in petrol. So that issue has now been resolved. But what dominates the bike, of course, is the engine. And it's a big, almost 1,000cc parallel twin. And it does look like an old Norton Commando from the 70s. But it doesn't quite perform like one because it makes a lot more power, it's a lot smoother, although that doesn't say very much compared to the old bikes. And so far anyway, it's been completely oil tight and reliable. I mean, this engine's even got push rods, for God's sake, in 2025. And that might seem old-fashioned, and it is, but it does have one or two advantages which I'll come back to in a moment. And other retro touches, of course, are things like the wheels, which have aluminium rims, but also they have stainless steel spokes, and they're both a modern size of 17 inches front and back. Now the bike is handmade in a factory in Solihull in Birmingham, of course, and you can tell it's really well put together. All the fasteners pretty much are stainless steel. The exhaust system is all handmade, again in stainless steel. And things like the cases are beautifully made and polished, and it's something you can be proud of, you know, in the years ahead. Meanwhile, the frame is very lightweight and very well made, and overall I'm really happy with the handling and performance of the bike. Now the engine only makes 77 brake horsepower, which doesn't sound a lot these days, but I think that's a very honest number. It's not sort of been massaged a little bit. Because, for example, I went for a ride on a Royal Enfield 650 Interceptor a while ago, and that's supposed to make about 47, 48 brake horsepower, which in truth is closer to 40 at the rear wheel. And it felt gutless compared to this thing, which is kind of what you expect, given that this thing cost, you know, almost, let's see, 3 times as much. So going back to cost, when these came out, they supposedly were like £16,995. I didn't pay that. I paid £15,000 for mine because at the time there was a dealer offer which knocked off £2,024 from the retail price. Slightly annoyingly, a little bit later on in the year, they added another £1,500 off if you part exchanged another bike, and it didn't matter what bike it was. You could have brought them a rusty old moped and they would have given you the extra £1,500, which was a bit annoying. Although I didn't have such a bike, but I'm sure I could have found one in no time and moved it on. Now since then, I think in January this year, Norton have come out with an amazing deal, a PCP deal, where you've got to spend, let's see, £69 deposit and £69 a month for 2 years, and you can ride away on one of these things. You then have a massive balloon payment at the end, of course, which is £12,000. But even so, it's a really, really good deal. And I know they sold out pretty much instantly. I've been told that of the 10 dealers in the UK, each one got an allocation of 30 bikes, 300 bikes in total, and they all went within a week. But I've also been told, we're now in April by the way, that in May or June there might be another really good offer coming along. So if you want one, perhaps that's the time to go and have a look at getting one of these things, because I really do like the bike. And so for me at least, the bike handles really, really well. I've never had a problem with it in any situation at all. The front suspension is fantastic, really the same, and the front Brembos are phenomenal. So much so in fact that I find myself rarely using the rear brake, although it does work, you know, just fine as you might expect. Next thing I found out that's a bit weird is that the engine has its drain plug in the sump for the oil, as you might expect, at the bottom of the engine, but it's obscured by the crossover pipe stroke catalyst right there. And so to drain the oil from this engine, you've got to remove the exhaust pipe, or at the very least, lower it down. That's something that'll be done at a service, so it doesn't bother me at the moment, but it's one of those sort of weird things you think, well, why have you done that? Now, I have read on the forums that it might just be possible to do it without lowering the exhaust system, but apparently it's a right pain and you might get oil everywhere. So yeah, that's something that I think could do with a bit more thought, but maybe that's just the way they had to do it. It actually does mean that in the future perhaps I might decat this bike, and that'll mean I'll get rid of that crossover pipe underneath and you get free access to the drain plug. That said though, by decatting it, it will make it a lot louder, and unusually for me, I don't want it to be any louder than it is now, because it sounds really nice. This bike is only sold in the UK, and therefore it only has to meet UK regulations, and that means, as I say, it sounds really nice compared to modern bikes. What's also good is the fueling is spot on with the injection system. It runs as it should do. It's not weak, low down like an awful lot of modern bikes are. So once you've got a new bike, you've got to pay an extra £500 or something like that for an ECU flash to make it run right. That's not an issue with this bike because it runs sweet from the off. So what else irritates me about the bike? Well, not much actually. I wasn't very happy with this styling of this Frenched-in rear lamp when I got the bike, but I'm coming round to it now. The one thing I wish Norton would offer though is a single seat option, because I'm never going to carry a pillion, and if I don't carry a pillion, it'd be nice if I got rid of this line here on this cover where the pillion seat would normally be. Some of the older Nortons from the 2010s did have that option, but the modern TVS Nortons don't offer you that option. Now, talking about options, you don't get very many. You can get a choice of a black bike or a silver bike, an SP Sport or a Cafe Racer with the clip-on bars, and that costs you about £400 more for some reason. You also get a choice of polished rims or black rims. I went for polished because I like a bit of bling, and yes, you've got to get down on your hands and knees occasionally and give them a good clean and polish, but that's what garage is for. That's what a long winter's for. You know, you go in the garage, get a cup of tea, put the radio on and get your bike clean. Another thing that people may not know is this frame is a oiling frame. The oil for the engine goes here and it's kept in the top tube of the frame, so it's kind of like a dry sumped engine, and that means that the engine itself can be lowered compared to bikes that have oil in the sump, and that makes it handle a bit better. Now, talking about the engine, I found it's plenty powerful enough to keep up with pretty much any sort of use you have. I can keep up with my mates on faster bikes because although it doesn't rev all that high and only makes 77 brake horsepower. You know, they're usable power. You don't have to rev the damn thing into 5 digits to get there. I mean, it runs out of puff at like 7,500 revs. I think Pete talks about 6. So if you change up about 6 or 7, you know, you're moving. You can get past cars, no problem. And yeah, so I'm pretty happy with the engine. It is quite old-fashioned, like a Harley, but that's what I like. Now, one thing a lot of YouTubers have complained about is, of course, vibration. And if you're used to an inline 4, a modern, smooth inline 4, yes, this thing does vibrate. But compared to an old Harley, it is actually nothing. That said, at any revs, the mirrors remain clear, they don't vibrate, and the bars don't vibrate either. But you do feel some vibration through the pegs. And that vibration comes in, I would say, just shy of 5,000 RPM, about 4.5, which in top gear is at 70 miles an hour. If you push it a bit more, they do vibrate a bit more, but then it kind of evens itself out and it doesn't get any worse. And quite honestly, that's not a problem for me. I can live with it. It's not really an issue. It just lets you know you've got an awfully big pair of pistons working away beneath your saddle. That's fine by me. Oh, and the gearbox. I'm very pleased with the gearbox. It's a 5-speed gearbox and I've never missed a shift. It's very positive. You know what gear you're in. Got no complaints at all. When I first got the bike, I did feel the bike was a bit under-geared, but then again, I'm used to riding 2-litre Harleys. But since then, I've got more miles on the bike and I'm now okay with it, and I think the gearing is pretty much spot on. I mean, in top gear, it'll hit, I think, about 125 in top gear, which, let's face it, for an old man like me is quite fast enough. So in terms of performance, I do have a mate with an old 90s Ducati M900 Monster, and we've been out quite a lot in the last year or so, and it turns out we're actually pretty evenly matched when it comes to performance of the engine. If you do roll-ons between, you know, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th gear, we're pretty much neck and neck, even Stevens through the acceleration. That said, his bike makes a bit less power than mine, but then again it is quite a few kilos lighter, so I guess it all evens out in the end. Next, I'll come to a couple of things that surprise me. The first one is the attention this bike gets from everybody. Doesn't matter if you're riding a sports bike, a chopper, an old classic, or even just members of the public who don't even have a bike. This bike really does get an awful lot of attention, much more so than I thought it would. I mean, I do own some custom Harleys, so I'm kind of used to getting some attention, but even they can't match the attention this thing's get. And the good news is, it's all positive attention. I've not heard anybody say a bad word about this bike, about the way it looks, about the way it sounds, you know, just about the fact it is a Norton built in the UK. So, yeah, it doesn't matter who you are, it has gained an awful lot of positive feedback. I even had an old lady who came up to me at some traffic lights and she wound the window down, shouting at me about something, so I had my earplugs in. I sort of looked round and she's waving at me, blowing kisses. But I don't think she's blowing kisses at me, I think she's blowing kisses at this Norton Commando, because I guess she must have recognised what it was. Perhaps her husband back in the day had a Norton, but who knows. So yeah, that is quite a nice thing about the bike. But if you're a bit shy and you don't like attention, then perhaps you should be wary about buying this bike. The second thing that surprised me was how much fun it is just riding it quite slowly. This is one of the appeals of having a Harley. If you've not got a Harley, you wouldn't understand it, I guess, but take, say, a sports bike, a Fireblade or whatever. If you're riding it at normal speeds, at legal speeds, let's face it, it's pretty damn boring. The bike just wants to go. You're in quite an uncomfortable riding position. You've got your clip-ons, your rear sets. It's no fun at all to be stuck in traffic, doing maybe 50 miles an hour on a windy road. You know, that's not what those bikes are built for. But this bike, in those conditions, is actually quite fun. You can listen to the exhaust pipe. It's got this big booming sound from the exhaust pipe. You know, you look down, it's a beautiful bike, and it just ticks along quite happily at 50, 60 miles an hour, and all's well with the world. You know, so that did surprise me that I did quite enjoy riding the bike. Not at 9 temps, but at sort of 4 temps, just cruising along like you would do on a custom Harley. So yeah, that's another positive thing about this bike. And so when it comes to costs, obviously I paid 15 grand for the bike. For me, insurance is really cheap, something like 250 quid, not really a problem, that's fully comp. And in terms of servicing, the first service at 500 miles cost me £300. And it needs servicing every year or every 6,000 miles. So I guess it'll be another £300 every year, which I think is quite reasonable. Now, the engine has push rods. It's got a hydraulic lifters like a Harley. While that might sound old-fashioned, and it is, it does have one benefit. There's no need ever to do a valve check. No need ever to reshim the valves, which can cost an awful lot of money, particularly if you own a modern sports bike like, say, a V4 Ducati. I have heard that people actually part exchange them just before that service is due because it can cost several £1,000s to do that service on a bike like that. Don't have that problem here with this bike. The power isn't so much that you're going to rip up tyres too quickly, so overall I think in terms of running costs, this bike should be quite cheap over the years ahead, and I think actually it will keep its value very well. Yes, they've given out this this fantastic deal recently, this PCP deal, but they won't be making these for much longer. Norton will be bringing out a whole new range soon, at which point it said they'll stop making this bike. And in terms of numbers, at most I think they're making probably 400 to 500 a year, which is great in a way because it's enough to make sure you've got spares availability into the future, but not so much that it becomes a common bike that anybody could have, you know. So once they start making them, I think the value of these might even go up a little bit, although I didn't buy it for that reason. I'm too old to worry about those sort of things. So what else can I say? Well, the running position is spot on for me. The bars are quite low compared to a lot of bikes like, say, the T120 Bonnevilles, and the tank's quite long. So you do have quite a long reach to the bars, and the pegs, while they're not rear sets, they are quite a long way back. But for me at 5'10", it suits me just fine. And this is actually quite a long seat, and you can slide back on it and get your head down a little bit if you're in the breeze on the motorway doing 70 plus. And that's the only time I wish I'd gone for the Cafe Racer version with the lower bars, because you know you get battered by the wind at motorway speeds. But I do try and keep away from motorbikes, so that doesn't happen very often. So I've talked about all the good things I like about the bike. What about the bad things? Well, there's one thing that springs to mind straight away, and I hated it on day one, and I still hate it now, and that's the fact that the pegs are not spring-loaded. So when you knock the peg, which I do a lot, they stay up, and you set off and you're looking, where the hell is the peg gone? And you're trying to get the bloody peg down as you set off, and you're looking down rather than looking where you're going. It's not ideal, it's not ideal. Now, since then, I have been told that Norton now offer a retro kit to put springs in these pegs or replace the pegs completely. And it's about £115, which I thought was quite a lot of money, but it annoys me so much, I may well get those spring-loaded pegs fitted the next time it goes in for a service. Next, fuel consumption, and quite frankly, I don't really care. But the 15-litre tank shows the green low-level light on the dash, for me, at about 120 or 130 miles. After that, you've got maybe another 20 miles to go before you run out completely. And quite frankly, that's fine by me, because it's a naked bike, and I probably will never ride it more than that distance without a brake anyway. The bike has a 2-year warranty, and so until that's expired, I don't want to touch the bike in any way. The only thing I've done is to make these parts here to replace the pillion pegs, which I never used anyway. The other problem I found was that the bike doesn't have mounts on the swing arm for paddock stands. Bit of a pain. So I've had to make some that go into the hollow rear axle. It won't allow you to remove the wheel, of course, when it comes to tyre changing, but it does allow you to adjust the chain and oil it and so on. So that's fine. So when it comes to changing the tyre, I'll just let the dealer do that. You know, it can be done when it's serviced at some point in the future. Next, when it comes to the riding position, well, I'm 5'10", and this bike suits me just fine, just fine. A lot of people on various YouTube channels have said they felt the bars were too low and too far away. But for me, I think it feels just fine, and I can get my legs, my knees tucked into this narrow part of the tank, no problem. Another issue that people talk about is that the pegs do seem to be quite wide, which they are, particularly in comparison to the slim tank. And if you somehow manage to push your knees right up against the tank, it does feel a bit odd because your ankles are so far out. Well, I say so far out, they are a little bit wider than you might expect, but after a week or two, you know, you soon get used to it. Other things you soon get used to is the side stand. People complain about it's difficult to find and it doesn't always lean the bike over just enough. But for me, not a problem. After a few days use, you know where it is, you get used to it. And on a bike like this, you're never going to leave it on unstable ground or a bit of mud or something like that. You know, you're going to make sure it's secure when you leave it be. I did call it in my first video about the bike the English Harley, and I do still stand by that description, in that it's got a very big, characterful, old-fashioned engine that sort of dominates the bike. But unlike a Harley, this is built in England for English roads, for British roads, which have curves and potholes and everything else, so it handles really well. It's got decent suspension, fantastic brakes, and yeah, I'm really happy with it overall. So there's my review, first year almost, of my 961. Now you might notice there's no onboard action photographs, no more videos of me whizzing along the road, as you often find on these YouTube reviews you see, because I don't own a GoPro. And if you want to see that kind of stuff, there's 100 other videos showing you what this bike looks like and sounds like on the road. Although that said, I've not heard one video yet that truly captures the sound of this bike. I guess it must be very difficult to do because you've got microphones and so on, but none of them really capture the real sound of this bike as you're riding it, particularly at high revs. Obviously the guys doing reviews on demo bikes are not going to be revving it off the rev limiter and, you know, really pushing it, because it's not their bike, but I do. And as I say, when you back it off at high revs, it does sound pretty damn amazing. The good news is, as I've already mentioned, if you want to try out this bike, dealers, they do offer demos, and they're very keen to get people bums on seats and try them out. And maybe, you know, you'll like it enough and go and buy one. I know my dealer there in Northwich, Oakmere, but they also have a place in Prestbury, which is near the Peak District, and they've got a nice planned out route you can go on over the Cat and Fiddle and so on towards Buxton. So yeah, they do like, I think Norton have to try to get you to try out the bikes. And I think if you are of a certain temperament, in that you've had all the different bikes in the world, you've had fast bikes and slow bikes and Harleys, everything else, you're looking for a sort of end of your riding life's bike that's going to last you 10 or 15, 20 years, this bike could well be it. And certainly a lot of people I've been talking to online or just in person, they're all getting on a bit, you know, in the 50s and 60s. They've had loads of cool bikes, and now they want to chill out and just have a bike they can be proud of, you know, go in the garage and polish it and go out on a sunny day, and away you go. And although oftentimes older classic bikes will fill that void, they're not always that reliable. I mean, I could have gone and bought a Norton Commando, an old one, an 850, but I wouldn't dream of taking a bike like that down a motorway for 100 miles and expecting it to be okay being kept in the fast lane for 100 miles. I mean, maybe it would be okay, but something tells me it wouldn't be. Whereas I would be quite happy to take this to the south of France and back, no problem, because I know it's going to be pretty damn reliable. Right, so that's it. If you've got any questions about things I've not covered on this bike, then please put them below. But I think I've covered pretty much everything. I was thinking actually of buying a GoPro just so I can do these on-road things, but there's 1,000 other videos of bikes like mine where people have done that, so I think you won't really learn anything more from watching me just ride a bike at sort of semi-legal speeds. You notice an awful lot of them always cover up speedo. Well, one thing I'm not going to do is speed on camera. That's the way you end up with your license revoked, so that's not going to happen. So anyway, that's it. So as I say, if you've got any questions, please put them below and I'll try and answer. And so that's it for now. And so thanks for watching, and cheers.